This episode is sponsored by Archaeological Tours. Want to dig deeper into Mexico's indigenous past and present? Allow Archaeological Tours to customize your Yucatán adventure. Archaeological works hand in hand with local indigenous guides to provide a tour that is entertaining, educational, and beneficial to the local community. For an adventure like no other, check out archaeogato.com. That's ARKEOGATO.com. Or just follow the link in the show notes. Now, on with the show.
You must excuse me. I've grown quite weary.
This hasn't been easy, I know. But you've learned a lesson. A lesson in honesty. Honesty to yourself and honesty to others. That lesson will stand you in good stead all your life.
I think we've all learned a good lesson. I've always heard that honesty is the best policy. Now I'm catching on to why that's so, and why that's so, and why that's so, and why that's so.
Greetings, dear listeners, and welcome to yet another episode of Tales from Atlantis. We are your hosts, Curly Tlapoyawa.
And Tlacateca.
How you doing, man? How are things?
I'm doing great.
In Tejaslan.
Doing pretty good. School started, brand new semester, fall. The weather's now beginning to get cooler. We're getting some rain, maybe a little too much of it.
Yeah, I saw that.
You know, that's the way we roll down here in Texas. We go from one extreme to the next.
Well, was that from your office that you posted
No, that's it's called the South Gate, I believe it's called, and it's a walkway that connects the west building where I am to the east building, and so it goes over that creek, and that's where I was able to take that picture of the roaring rapids through Mountain View campus.
Should have grabbed an inner tube and gone for
a
ride.
That's what some kids were saying. Oh, I wish we had some rafts. We can go rafting. I'm like, damn. Okay.
This is what it's come to. Now we have a rafting program.
There you go.
So I thought today, since we are fast approaching the anniversary of the Chicano Moratorium, we could watch this short film that was produced in 1970, and this film was uploaded to YouTube on February 17th, 2010, and I'll read the little blurb.
So when they posted it, it was the 40th anniversary of the Chicano Moratorium, right? Yes. Now we're looking at, what is it, 52?
52.
Yeah.
Damn. Time flies. I actually went, and I don't remember which anniversary it was. This was in the 90s.
Well, this is a bundle in Mexica time, right? 52 years? What do you call that? What's the bundle called?
Oh, you are correct, sir. How did I miss that? I need to turn in my calendar card.
You need to turn in your Mexica card, isn't it?
Damn.
We're revoking your Mexica identity.
Shumopili. The bundling of years. 52 years since the Chicano Moratorium. That's wild. I would hope that they would make a big deal out of that.
Because I know
was it 52
last year or the year before? Maybe it was for the 50th anniversary during the pandemic. I think there was a lot of stuff that was taking place mainly online, I think, like commemorations and stuff. But who knows? I haven't kept up with it. Because I know the committee's still around, right? The National
absolutely.
Moratorium Committee.
Yeah, they still have the march. I don't think they did during the pandemic.
Yeah,
but they might be having one.
Have you heard of anything going on this year?
I haven't, but I also haven't been too active on like Facebook and stuff.
Okay.
Been out in the field, man. But
so this is the Shimopilia of the Chicano Moratorium.
Yeah.
That's wild.
4 sets of 13, 52-year anniversary. That's
we need
very
to
cool.
We need to at some point in a different episode, we need to address the whole 500 years like the commemoration that a lot of people did last year for 2021 being the 500 years since 1521, and like one of the things that people that follow me on Twitter might have noticed, or follow the Atlantis Tales, might have noticed that I was like, that 500 is not a meaningful number in our count, right? So I mean, I get that people, in contemporary society,
nice round number.
It's a nice round number. It's 5 centuries, but for our people, it's meaningless in terms of our count. So we need to figure out, like, what does it mean for us, right?
Yeah.
When is the big anniversary for us? What should we be sort of planning towards to mark that event for our purposes as Chicano Mexicano peoples, right?
Yeah, that's an excellent idea, Dr. Ariano. Yeah, 52 years. And I don't remember which anniversary it was for. I have the commemorative pin that I bought there. Mm-hmm. But I was really young. This was like in the 90s during that whole resurgence of the Chicano movement. And it was actually really, really big. It was a big event. And I remember the march itself, going to Roosevelt Park, and we passed under this bridge, and there were so many people, and there were, people blowing out the cocolis, and you could hear, the drums and danzantes and people chanting, and just that energy and the number of people as we passed under that bridge, all that sound echoing. And that's the one thing, like, I got chills going under that bridge because it just felt so powerful to have all of our people together like that. And then we get to the park itself, and, I'm like this, Chicano movement kid, all rosy-eyed and gung-ho, and then I start seeing, like, oh, so those brown berets don't get along with those brown berets, and these guys hate danzantes, and these guys, and everybody kind of had their own little onda. They had informational booths and stuff and food, and once we got to the park, I just kind of walked around. I was trying to take it all in and just, buy books and experience everything. But I remember that's my first exposure to the Mexica movement. Was at that park on that day, and they were selling Olin Tezcatlipoca's book, the Mexica handbook, and I was gonna buy it because it, why not, right? Mexica handbook. Oh, dope! This is probably awesome, right? And I started talking to them, and I could tell they were kind of filling me out. And I told them I was a danzante, so this must have been like 94, 95, because I had just started dancing. And they just, like, their whole demeanor towards me changed, and they started talking down to me, and I was like, yeah, I'm not going to buy this book. But the march itself, and I still had a good time that day, like a handful of pendejos weren't going to ruin my time there. It was an awesome road trip out. It was the local La Raza Unida party and the La Raza Youth Committee, which I was a member of. We went out together, rented a van or something. We all went out there. We slept on the floor of this house in East LA, so with friends, and it was just cool, like the whole experience was badass. Yeah. And that just always stuck out, that these guys were like, ugh, you're a danzante.
You're not a real Mexica if you're a danzante.
Yeah, but
wasn't that part of their argument that what's his name Olin used to make?
Yeah, that you're not a real warrior, that you're focusing on the wrong things, and, this and that. I didn't really pay any attention. I kind of just shut off and was like, all right, well, I was going to buy this book, but never mind. I did grab a few of their flyers because I was still curious, like, well, what the hell are these guys all about then, if they're anti-danzante and they don't seem to get along with anybody else at this march. But for our listeners who don't know what the Chicano Moratorium was, I pulled up the wiki page, so hopefully this is all, it seems all accurate. I'm only going to read the first paragraph. It says the Chicano Moratorium, formerly known as the National Chicano Moratorium Committee Against the Vietnam War, was a movement of Chicano anti-war activists that built a broad-based coalition of Mexican-American groups to organize opposition to the Vietnam War. Sounds legit. Led by activists from local colleges and members of the Brown Berets, a group with roots in the high school student movement that staged walkouts in 1968, the coalition peaked with an August 29, 1970 march in East Los Angeles that drew 30,000 demonstrators. The march was described by scholar Lorena Oropesa as one of the largest assemblages of Mexican Americans ever. It was the largest anti-war action taken by any single ethnic group in the USA. And so I pulled up this short film, and the blurb on the short film says, on August 29th, 1970, a Chicano moratorium against the war in Vietnam was held in East LA. Loyola Marymount film student Tom Myrdal shot this documentary, capturing the events that unfolded as law enforcement and protesters clashed in and around Laguna Park. Because it wasn't called Roosevelt Park, it was Laguna Park. This film has not been seen in nearly 40 years.
Wait, didn't they rename the park after Ruben Salazar?
Yeah, I was going to get to that.
We'll be back after a quick break.
This episode of Tales from Astlantis is brought to you by Astlantis Premium. Don't you just hate having your favorite podcast interrupted by ads like this? Well, dear listener, you're in luck. Because starting at just $3 a month, you can support independent Chicano media and receive ad-free episodes, premium episodes, bonus content, and access to our Discord server. Just visit talesfromastlantis.com and click Go Premium, or follow the link in the show notes. And now, on with the show.
Okay.
But I'm so used to seeing it called Roosevelt Park to see Laguna Park. I was like, Laguna Park? Oh yeah, it was called Laguna Park back then. This film has not been seen in nearly 40 years. Tom, who is still a working cameraman in Los Angeles, shout out Tom, is putting this historic film on the web as a tribute to the brave citizens of East LA who came together 40 years ago to voice their dissent against the Vietnam War. And of course, like you just mentioned, there were 4 deaths at the moratorium. I guess the police pretext, right, or the excuse is they claim that somebody had robbed a liquor store nearby and then had run into the park where 30,000 people were having like this peaceful demonstration. And if you watch footage of it, it was families, it was people dancing and having a good time, and there were bands playing and folklorico, and like all this cool stuff was going on. And so the cops, allegedly looking for this guy who had robbed the liquor store, got really violent and went into the park, and a massive riot broke out. And I think there's even a quote in here of how Alurista, who we had mentioned before, says that the police called it a people's riot, the people called it a police riot.
Right.
The 4 people who were murdered were Gustav Montag, who was like what we would call today an ally, right? He was a white guy that was there to support the Chicanos. Lynn Ward, a Brown Beret. Angel Diaz, another Brown Beret. And most notably, Ruben Salazar, an award-winning journalist who was killed while sitting at a diner, right?
Yeah, the Silver Dollar.
Yeah. A diner or a bar, I can't remember. But they shot him in the head with one of these tear gas canisters.
Yeah, there was this documentary that was produced some years ago, maybe 5 years, 6 years now at this point, that kind of goes over the evidence, goes over the eyewitness testimonies, and they want to strike a balance throughout the documentary, but at the end, like, and if I'm not mistaken, it was done, either produced or done in collaboration with Chicanos to give it a sense of it, coming from the community and taking a critical lens and a critical stance on what occurred and what transpired, and especially the death of Ruben Salazar. And at the end, if I'm not mistaken, it's been years, but if I'm not mistaken, they conclude that they kind of side with the official narrative by the police that the officer who shot into the Silver Dollar Saloon, I think it was a bar.
Yeah, you're right. The Silver Dollar Saloon. Yeah.
That the officer who shot in there didn't know who was in there, that he was just like shooting. He shot through the window.
Indiscriminately.
Right. Like, why would anyone do that? Right. Even if he didn't know who was in there, that's still negligent of him to have
whether
done
he
that.
was trying to murder Ruben Salazar or
right.
not.
That's besides the point. He killed someone, and the Chicano community for the longest time viewed it as an assassination because that's basically what it looked like, right? This is a very vocal journalist who was on the side of the Chicanos in LA, and he was one of the prominent journalists who was given a voice to the people. And then here he is reporting on the Chicano Moratorium that the police later instigated into a riot, and then he gets killed. So, I mean, what else is a community supposed to think? And then all these years later, they produce this documentary that at the end pretty much kind of, sides with the official narrative. And what are we supposed to do with that now, right? Like, was Ruben Salazar targeted or was he not? I mean, they kind of leave it a little bit ambiguous, but at the same time, they're saying without any other evidence to counter the official narrative that we basically have to go with the official narrative of the police. So I'm like, well, that's BS. That's bullshit.
Yeah. And regardless if whether he was intending to kill him or not, and he didn't know who was in there, he shot and if you look at the size of these tear gas canisters, it's like a small missile that this guy just shot
right
into this building.
And
that people were in.
Coincidentally, when he shot it, it struck Ruben Salazar in the head.
Yeah.
I mean, what a coincidence, right? I mean,
so where were you aiming, bro? Like, come on. Yeah, so rest in peace, Gustav Montag, Lynn Ward, Angel Diaz, Ruben Salazar. This massive riot broke out. It says over 150 people were arrested. 4 were killed, as we mentioned. And I remember for the longest time, as part of this, brief resurgence of the Chicano movement in the 90s, there was this strong push to basically declare August 29th as Chicano Memorial Day. Basically a day to commemorate and honor the memories of all the Chicano, Chicana, Chicanx, however they want to affiliate nowadays, activists who were killed during the Chicano movement. Because there were quite a few. You have Los Seis de Boulder, who were killed in car bombings. You have Ricardo Falcón, who was killed by a white supremacist. And you have the killings of the people at the Chicano Moratorium. So there was this push to basically declare like August 29th should be, for what it's worth, a Chicano national holiday or day of commemoration. And, I was part of that. I really thought that would have been a good thing to just basically make August 29th Chicano Memorial Day. So
yeah,
with the powers vested in me by the Kingdom of Atlantis, I hereby declare August 29th an official holiday within Atlantis.
Orale. Yeah, when you were saying that, it reminded me of a book that I picked up recently, and I've shared it, the picture of it on Twitter, and a few people have recently bought it and also shared it. It's called Through Brown Eyes, and it was written by
the Brown Beret guy, right?
Brown Beret here in Dallas, Juan Perez. And in that book, he chronicles, because the book itself was published, if I'm not mistaken, in 2016. but it's a book that it was based on a manuscript that he had started to write back in the late 70s, back when he was beginning to exit and make his way out of the movimiento. And he had been, throughout his 10 years that he was with the Brown Berets here in Dallas, he had been documenting and saving like newspaper clippings of all the people who had been brutalized and murdered by the Dallas police. And he's got a super long list, not just here in Dallas, but like throughout Texas. And he also kind of documented some in New Mexico and other places. But like his main focus was Dallas and Texas. And I was thinking, man, if we had a holiday, some sort of day to commemorate all those people that were killed, that were assassinated for standing up for social justice and against racism and discrimination, standing up for our people. I mean, that would be awesome, something that we could collectively celebrate as our own Memorial Day of Chicano Mexicanos.
Yeah, something that's uniquely ours.
Because we have a lot of people who have died over the years,
Yeah,
they died standing up for what they believe in, standing up for the community, standing up for the rights of our gente. And that's something that a lot of people have forgotten over the years. Not only has the Chicano movement itself been sort of relegated to the margins of even social justice and civil rights history, and as a history professor, like when I'm teaching that period in time, I teach it in Mexican American history, but when I'm teaching just your survey of American history, 1302, and whenever we get to that point, I make it a point to emphasize not just the Chicano movement, but also bring into the discussion, the Red Power movement, Native American people, women, Asians, and other minority, right? Because more often than not, the discussion, especially publicly, especially in the media and everything that you see is usually couched in this black and white lens, and everyone else just sort of gets dismissed or not really discussed and
just ignored
really. Right? I mean, in some instances completely ignored and totally just written out of the discussion altogether, like our people and other ethnic minorities and other groups weren't fighting for their own civil rights. And so
for all of this talk of inclusion nowadays, we sure do get excluded a lot.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. Yeah, I think. And what was the title of that book?
Through Brown Eyes. That's the main title. I'm blanking out on the subtitle.
There's a subtitle. And then it's the cover is, if I remember correctly, it's a photograph of the author dressed in his brown beret uniform, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So those of you that are interested in the Chicano movement, and if you think you've read it all and you're well versed in it, Dallas still has something to offer to the overall history and discussion of the Chicano movement.
Absolutely. Well, cool, man. Let's check out this short documentary by Tom Myrdal. It is simply called Chicano Moratorium.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Have you picked up your Mexica calendar for the year 12 Flint? Or how about a paperback copy of The Four Disagreements? Just visit talesfromatlantis.com for all the latest merchandise and show some love for your favorite podcast. That's talesfromatlantis.com for all the latest merchandise. Now, back to the show.
Of Aztlan echo cries of hunger. Now the blood of my brothers flows over the land once ours. I am Chicano. My people are La Raza. Too many Chicanos have died in foreign jungles. Too many have died in barrio streets. Ya, basta. Yo soy Chicano.
He's walking with a purpose.
Yeah.
This is for La Raza. Yes, for us.
East
And
Los
for the world to
Angeles,
see. Because today is a day of history.
August 29th,
for all La Raza.
1970.
Wherever they are. Throughout Latin America, throughout Mexico, wherever brown people exist, today is a day of history. And from this day on, La raza mexicana shall be history.
Chicanos are marching to protest the high casualty rate of our people in Vietnam. We have suffered 22% of all casualties in Vietnam, yet we only make up 5% of the total population here in the United States. The Chicano people, through our moratorium, are saying now that the front line for Chicano youth is not in Vietnam, but in the struggle for social justice here in the barrios of the United States.
Before, the people were divided very much, especially during the Pachuco days. Chicano would be fighting Chicano. Now I see unity. Like now you can go from one barrio to another, and you're brothers. And this is really beautiful to see people united and fighting for the same cause.
The Brown Berets evolved out of the movement in the Chicano community for social justice. The Brown Berets are a community organization that give new pride to Chicano youth and that educate all the people in the barrios on their social and political rights.
Be brown and be proud.
That's a dope saying.
It is.
Of over 20,000 people in the march, more than 7,000 remained to listen to música and speeches from various Chicano community leaders.
We are a bronze people with a bronze culture. Before the world, before all of North America, before all
Who's
our
speaking?
brothers on this
I don't know who that is.
Is that Alorista?
We are a nation. We are a union of free pueblos. We are
I don't believe so. That doesn't sound like him. I know this song.
A block east of the north end of the park, there is a liquor store. A few people were walking out of the store without paying for their merchandise. Somebody called the police.
The younger kid came back with the police. Two more squad cars. They pulled up right together, and they were the ones that they had their sirens and the lights. Another car pulled up, and all the police that were across the street had shotguns. And right then and there, I saw bottles.
At this point, there was a small crowd of people reacting to the overpresence of the police. The police had a choice of coming to the platform, using our mic, and asking our Chicano leaders to calm the situation, or to bring in reinforcements and to clear the whole park. Their answer was quick and without hesitation.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah. And how
Any
quickly
excuse
that
to beat
changes,
on some
man.
brown folks.
Yeah.
So we go from one scene where you have kids dancing to the music to the next minute, the police coming into the park and basically just beating on people and rushing on people indiscriminately with no care for the families, for the children, for who's there, just rushing in as if there's some kind of military force going in to fight their enemy, because that's what they viewed and they continue to view us as the enemy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Brown people, indigenous people, we continue to be the face of the opposition to what this country stands for from its inception as an imperialist hegemonic force.
We are foreigners in perpetuity.
So then I started yelling, so they wouldn't beat any no more, because 2 or 3 officers and sometimes 6 would get a boy and they were beating him up. And then they would go and get on somebody else. And some of them, they would take them away. But that lady, they just left her there.
Bastards.
And more roll in. that guy probably saved his homie's life.
Yeah. Because those trigger happy cops, they're just itching to pull that trigger.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Are those people on the street just laying there?
No, those are I think those are they're mannequins from a store.
We're not against anyone
okay.
against the black people or the white people. We're against the pigs. We're against oppression. Our organization, our peoples, is being raised in the white person's mind as a stereotype. How the hell are we going to grow up and become anything if the white people keep pushing into our minds that we're nothing but a bunch of Frito banditos, okay? We're a bandito, well, a bandito's go to jail, okay? Right, in Norco, the narcotics hospital in Corona, okay, there's almost 80% Chicanos. You know that? You know why? Because the Chicanos are trying to escape from their environment. They aren't satisfied. They can't dig it. They can't live in this environment. We cannot live in this environment. The white people have given it to us, and we cannot survive in it. We either have to go to jail or have to die. We're ready to die to get out of it.
Ruben Salazar, a Chicano newspaper and television writer.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, so no one had seen this footage since he originally produced it in 1970. Like, did he show it in 1970, or did he shelve it? Was it like put away?
I would imagine that.
And then
if he was a film student,
to release
somebody
it.
must have seen it. And then,
but it wasn't like publicly shown, right?
I don't think so. That'd be good to find out, because some of the footage is the same footage that I've seen from like
right, like the opening
Requiem
scenes, but
29.
like I've never seen some of this stuff here where you have the police going in the streets and where you can see the sort of like the action taking place in the street, not just at the park, but like when they shifted from the park, when they went into the streets, and you can see some of those buildings on fire and stuff. Like I'd never seen that before.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in here that I haven't seen.
Who more than anyone else had accelerated the unifying forces in the community, sought shelter in a local bar.
And they was coming this way, and 3 shots came. Then I hit the floor, and when I hit the floor, Mr. Salazar was falling down, and I looked at him, and he was shaking.
You might not live in the barrio, but I've been here since, let's say, since the 40s or whatever. I believe that if they're not going to listen, this thing's going to come on again, and it's going to continue until there's a change, because kind words ain't going to change it anymore.
Produced by Nikolai Sherbin, directed by Thomas Murdahl. Camera by Nikolai Sherman, Carlos Chavez, Jose Rivera, Thomas Murdahl, John Hunt. Edited by Thomas Murdahl, music by Bob Chadwick. Educational consultant Bert Corona. Oh, wow.
Bert Corona.
Yeah. Powerful stuff.
So it really pisses me off when stuff like this sort of just gets whitewashed and diluted into the whole, Latino, Latina, Latinx narrative, as if all these people who identify as Latina, Latino, Latinx, many of whom, are people who didn't even, like, their families weren't even around at the time that this occurred. Like their families might have come in sometime in the 70s. And so they have no frame of reference as to the struggles of the Chicano Mexicano people, who have been here on these lands since before this was the United States. And then for our history to just sort of get, swept up in this larger narrative without any context as to why this matters to us so deeply, and how it's not the same. This isn't Latino, Latinx history. This is Chicano,
this is
Chicana, Chicanx history.
Yeah.
It's completely separate from that whitewash narrative. And that's one of the reasons why it doesn't get explored, it doesn't get explained, it doesn't get exposure. And a lot of our young people have no clue because, there's when you subsume it under a broad umbrella term like Latina, Latino, Latinx, that category in itself, encompasses so much that you're going to give very little time to everything that there is to know about what that umbrella is representing. And so stuff like this never sees the light of day.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really disappointing. And that's one of the things that I teach my students. Like for instance, today in class, I told the students that, we're in a survey history course, and we're going to try to touch upon the important things that, we as historians think that people should know about our collective past as citizens of this country, but also as global citizens, because, that's the way that I approach the course. It's an American history course, but I globalize it. I bring it, I put it into context with the wider world and I teach students that, the U.S. doesn't exist in a bubble. Things that happen here impact others around the world and vice versa. And so that's why we're going to look at history through that kind of lens. And when you when you sort of subsume things like the Chicano Moratorium into the things like Latina, Latino, Latinx, and students don't get exposed to it because there's other stuff that category is going to prioritize.
Yeah, you're trivializing.
Our people don't realize, right? Well, not only trivializing, but they don't realize that there's so much history that roots us to this space, because one of the things that the media, going back to the media and the issues that I have with just the media in general, is that when our people are depicted in the media, when outside of like the news, the nightly news where they're showing someone that's being accused of something or committing a crime or what have you, it's always couched and framed in the narrative of immigration somehow, whether you're first generation or second, but it's always an immigrant story of some sort. Very rarely do you get the sense that our people have deep roots in this land, in this space. Very rarely do you see that. And by dismissing things like the Chicano Moratorium that occurred in 1970, before the large-scale immigration that occurred in the 70s, where most of the current population can trace their roots to, that form this broad Latino, Latina, Latinx category. Like they don't, since they're not getting that frame of reference, they have no idea of the things that occurred. And so that's why it's easy for them to dismiss, Chicanos, they're just complaining,
Yeah. Or they've never suffered. Who are they?
They've never suffered. What do they know? Yeah. Right.
They've never struggled.
And so that's a big, that's one of the biggest, I guess, disappointments that I have with the way that, and I think in part it's also our community, our people, our so-called teachers who failed over the years they got caught up, they got swept up in the whole Hispanic, identity in the 80s into the 90s, and then with the Latino identity into the 90s and the 2000s and to the present, that they did our community a disservice. They kind of put us into the back burner because now we're part of a collective whole that we need to be more more united and more inclusive, but at the same time that inclusivity is going to exclude certain narratives, and this is one of them.
Absolutely. You speak the truth, my brother. And you know what I say about the truth?
What's that, homie?
The truth is like medicine. It doesn't always taste good, but it's always good for you.
Chicano power.
Hells yeah, Chicano power. I want to thank our Patreon supporters for listening to this special premium episode of the Chicano Moratorium. I'm going to be posting the link to the video to Requiem 29, which is another documentary made about the Chicano Moratorium. And, thank everybody for supporting the show. We've been getting a lot of really good feedback lately. It's making me feel good to know that people are listening and that it's affecting them in a positive way. So,
absolutely. Please wherever you can. Give us a rating, and if you are inclined to do so, give us also a review, and those things help us out, spread the message, and encourage more people to listen to the show and help us grow.
Timoitase. Thank you for listening to Tales from Atlantis, a project of the Chimali Institute of Mesoamerican Arts. If you enjoy the show, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter. You can do this by visiting talesfromatlantis.com and clicking Support the Podcast. Your continued support will help keep the podcast ad-free and independent. Until next time, Timoitase.